coming out. I also wanted to introduce my friend, State Senator Tom Davis from Hilton Head. We were at Spartanburg a little while ago. What's it? Beacons or Beacon?
The Beacon.
The Beacon. Oh man, we had such good barbecue. If I fall asleep, it's because the barbecue, all the blood drained to my stomach. Well, we were in line there, and there was a guy in front of me, and he had 2 plates of barbecue. And I said, look, you're not going to live very long eating like that. And he said, well, my granddad lived to be 105.
Wow.
I said, well, I don't think he lived to be 105 eating like that. He said, no, he lived to be 105 by minding his own business. Some of us would like the government to mind their own business and leave us alone. I see no reason in the world, no practical reason why the government would have all of our phone records. Why the government would gather them up, spend billions of dollars, and stick them in Utah, underground in Utah. I see no reason why we need to do that. I worry that we lose our privacy, we lose who we are. Justice Brandeis said that the right to be left alone is the most cherished of rights. To be most prized by a civilized man is the right to be left alone. The thing is it's the collection of all this data, whether it's abused or not, that abuses our rights. Our founding fathers fought a revolution over this. John Adams said that the spark that led to the War of Independence, that led to our War for Independence, the spark was James Otis arguing against generalized warrants. I don't know what can be more generalized than a single order that has one name on it, Verizon. I don't know anybody named Mr. Verizon. I see no reason why you put the name of one company and you get the records of everybody in the whole country. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it's practically not working. The Department of Justice investigated all of this bulk collection and came out with a report just last week. They said there have been no breakthroughs. The President's own Privacy Commission said no unique data is being collected by this. So one, it's practically not adding anything. In fact, I think it may be the opposite. I think we may be collecting so much information that we're overwhelmed by the information and we're not connecting the dots because we have too much. Think about it this way. The 2 boys that were the Boston bombers, the older brother, the Russians had tipped us off to it. We interviewed him but didn't arrest him, but then we didn't know he had flown back to Chechnya and that he'd been radicalized. I'm all for privacy, but call me up. If I'm the judge, I'm the first one to say yes. You can search this boy's records. But that means having a name on the warrant and having some information you give to the judge as to why he's suspicious. But that's a lot different from saying, a lot of people own guns down in South Carolina. Maybe we need records of all these people. Maybe we need to know where they keep their guns. Maybe we need to know who they are. My guess is not many people in South Carolina are going to vote for that kind of thing. We've got to do what we can to keep government at bay and keep our liberty prized and near. As we look at this, and as we move forward, we're going to have a big battle. Oh, there's the NSA again. My voice is still a little raspy from the battle. I spoke for 10.5 hours against this last week. And some of my colleagues were upset. Some of my colleagues were upset because I messed up their weekend. They had known for 4 years that this was coming up. It was set to expire after 4 years on a certain date. We could have easily done it, but we got distracted doing other things, and then they said, we don't have time to debate the Bill of Rights. Well, my goodness, I don't know of anything more important than taking the time to debate the Bill of Rights. One of the things I've asked for is that if we're going to have one standard for collecting information for people overseas that might be foreigners, I can live with that. But that information shouldn't be used against an American citizen in a domestic trial. I'll give you an example. Remember Leona Helmsley? When she finally got tripped up for, I don't know why, someone has $1 billion has to bring paint home from the hotel to paint her house, but it's a tax violation. But think about it. would we want to use the Patriot Act that we're going after terrorists to find people that might be breaking the IRS code? And using a standard that means we can go in anybody's house anytime we want. Under the Patriot Act, there's something called sneak and peek. Section 213 of the Patriot Act says the government can come in your house without announcing you're coming in. They can look at your stuff, place listening devices, and leave. So people said, well, we just need to catch terrorists, so we're going to have a slower standard. But you know what? It turns out now 99% of the time, the sneak and peek warrant is being used for American citizens for domestic crime. So we sort of got rid of the constitutional protection, said we're going to use it for terrorism, but we're not using it for terrorism, we're using it on our own citizens. In 2011, we had this debate. And we had a debate over whether or not an American citizen could be indefinitely detained and sent to Guantanamo Bay with no trial. So we're on the Senate floor, we're having this debate, and I'm having this debate with another Republican senator. I don't want to name any names, he was from Arizona, but... So I'm having this debate with him, and I say, you wouldn't send an American citizen to Guantanamo Bay without a trial, would you? And his response was, well, if they're dangerous. And it's like, kind of begs the question, isn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not dangerous? You can imagine a lot of times when you would want to have a trial, you'd want to have an attorney. There was a Department of Justice pamphlet that went out to fusion centers around the country, and it listed some characteristics that might put you on the list of people who are suspicious. Let's think what some of these were. Oh, missing fingers. Anybody know a farmer in South Carolina that's missing fingers?
Exactly.
I know some farmers in Kentucky missing fingers and they're not terrorists. Changing the color of your hair. Anybody know anybody's changing the color of their hair? All right, that's getting too personal. We're not going to go there. Stains on the clothing. These were characteristics. Having weatherized ammunition, having multiple guns in the house. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But if these are the characteristics of potential terrorists, a lot of regular Americans who are not breaking any law might fit the bill. You need to have a lawyer. You need to have your day in court. You should never, ever allow your government to get rid of something we've been fighting for 1,000 years to limit the power of the state since probably, actually, the Romans and the Greeks had juries. But we're going to give up on it because we're afraid. Our standard has always been innocent until proven guilty. Now you know what they tell you? You've got nothing to hide. You've got nothing to fear. You mind if the government looks at all your stuff if you haven't done anything wrong, right? Think of what that leads to. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear from your government. It should be about trying to restrain the scope and size of government. Lincoln once said that any man can stand adversity, but if you want to challenge a man, you want to test a man, give him power. That's a true test. Will your president, the person you give all of this power, try to accumulate more, or will they obey the Constitution? This president, I think, has not proven himself worthy of what Lincoln said. This president at every step has done things he said he wouldn't do. He used to be one who was an opponent of the Patriot Act. He at one time said judges should sign warrants. And now he does all of this and says, oh, but I'm a good man. I won't invade your privacy. As he scoops up and collects all of our records. If we want to win the presidency again, I know in South Carolina you're kind of spoiled to think, oh, we're Republicans, we win all the time now, right? You win all the time. That's good. Well, we've got 18 states we haven't won in 30 years. So really what we need is you to help us with the other states as well, right? But the thing is that to win the other states, to win the purple states, states like Colorado, Pennsylvania, Iowa, New Hampshire, states that have all gone to President Obama the last 2 times. There are a couple different factions of our party. One faction of our party says, oh, we need to just dilute what we stand for. We need to be Democrat-light, and if we were more like the Democrats, we could win. I reject that wholesale. That's not who I am, and I hope that's not who I am. I think the opposite. I think we need to be bigger, better, and bolder. I think we need to be boldly for what we are for. I was a kid when I met Reagan when I was 15. And when Reagan was elected, it seems like he didn't apologize about being for lower taxes. He dramatically lowered the tax rate and created millions of jobs. He was for less regulation and smaller government and believed in the marketplace. But you know what passes for bold in Washington right now? If you'll talk to anybody on the tax committee, all these famous names you've heard, you know what they're trying to get? They're trying to get revenue neutral tax reform. I tell them, are you insane? Do you think that you're going to go to South Carolina and any of you are going to knock on the door and say, hey, will you vote for my candidate? He's for revenue neutral tax reform. That means half of you pay more and half of you pay less, and the net effect for the economy is zero. Why don't we be for cutting taxes, which means we leave more money in South Carolina and less money in Washington? We're going to be coming out with our tax plan in the next couple of weeks. Our tax plan is going to be a single rate for everybody. It's going to be in the teens. And it's going to be the largest tax cut in our history because I think you can spend the money a lot wiser than Washington. I think to win nationally, we need to be the party of the entire Bill of Rights. We're good on the Second Amendment. I defend the Second Amendment as much or more than anybody else. But I think we've got almost everybody who believes in the Second Amendment in our party. What we need to do is reach out and get some new people. The Fourth Amendment's about privacy, the right to privacy. It says that the government can't come in your house without a warrant with your name on it, with suspicion and signed by a judge. There's a lot of new people that have come into our party. Look around you. There's young people in the crowd. Everywhere I go, there are new people that have come in if we'll be the party that stands up for privacy. Because guess what? The president's not doing it. Some Republicans aren't. But it's definitely an issue where the candidate that comes forward and says they're for privacy is going to bring in and bring new people. We're going to be a bigger, better party. But we also need to be the party of justice. Everybody needs to be treated fairly under the law. Everybody needs to be treated the same. We have to talk about the fact that we are going to be the champions of minority rights. The thing is that people say, you know, I'm not a minority. Guess what? You may be. Do you teach your kids at home? Are you an evangelical Christian? Are you Jewish? Are you any kind of minority that thinks, you know what? If the government starts making special laws for minority, they might catch me up. I had an employee for many years, and a friend of mine, who was one of the first homeschoolers in Kentucky. You know what they did to his parents? They arrested him and gave him a year in prison. Fortunately, they didn't have to serve. About that time, we decided we'd change our law and say that it wasn't against the law to teach your kids at home. You can be a minority because of the shade of your skin or the shade of your ideology. You can be a minority because you say, I go to church and I don't want the government coming in my church and telling me what right and wrong is. There are a lot of reasons to object to government getting involved in your lives. The Fifth and Sixth Amendment talk about justice. I think we should be the party of justice. Why do the Democrats get to go around saying they're for justice, they're for social justice? Why don't we be the party of justice? The Fifth Amendment says the government can't take your stuff. The government can't take your property without just compensation, without due process. But they're doing it. The Kelo case was a big Supreme Court case a while back, and you know what they said was okay? It's okay to take property from people who own their house, own their condo, and give it to a big corporation. That should never happen in America. You should never take private property and give it to another private property. In our country right now, there's something called civil asset forfeiture. You can be riding down the street with $1,000. You get pulled over, and the government says to you, do you have any money in your car? And you say, well, yeah, I've got $1,000. I'm going to pay my dentist. I'm going to have my tooth fixed. And they can say, well, we can't prove that you didn't get the money illegally, so give it to us. And you're like, what? You can't have my $1,000. And they say, okay, we'll negotiate. You can keep $500 if you sign this agreement saying you promise not to sue us for taking your money. You think I'm making that up, and that's some other country. It happens every day in our country. But interestingly, it happens to poor people more than rich people. happens to black people, Hispanic people, it happens to people who have less means of defending themselves. Also happens to rich people too. The Hearst brothers were three rich, had a decent sized business. They had $500,000 confiscated by Loretta Lynch, and she was the attorney general up there, or the U.S. attorney in Manhattan. Took their money, they were in a snack business, and they had a lot of cash coming in. So a lot of people with a lot of cash coming in and want to put it in the bank so it doesn't get stolen. They got them for programmed deposits or whatever, avoiding the law through programmed deposits. They've done the same to like Korean owners of a grocery store who are in a poor area of town, but they want to put their money in so they don't get robbed. Government just takes their money and says, prove that you didn't get it illegally. I have a bill that says the government never can take your stuff unless you're convicted of a crime. Some say the right to privacy is not in the Fourth Amendment, that we're making it up. And some good conservatives make this mistake. But the Ninth and 10th Amendment are really important. The Ninth Amendment says that those rights not listed are not to be disparaged. You do have a right to privacy. Your rights are unenumerated. We had this debate over the Bill of Rights. Some worried when we did the Bill of Rights, they said, well, if you listed them, the people will think that's all of your rights, and that's a complete listing. So some people didn't want the Bill of Rights. This was Madison's original argument saying maybe we shouldn't do it because the people think that's all the rights we have. So then someone said, no, we'll add the Ninth and 10th Amendment. The Ninth Amendment says you have an infinite amount of rights. They're yours. The only thing the government has are the enumerated powers. The 10th Amendment says we gave certain powers to government, but everything else was left to the states and the people. If we're the entire Bill of Rights, think about how that encompasses and brings in new people. And I want to end with the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a trial by jury and a speedy trial. Anybody remember the debate? We talked about it a little bit over indefinite detention. That we would put an American citizen away. Richard Jewell, everybody remember him? He was everybody said he was an Olympic bomber. But the thing is, he wasn't the Olympic bomber. It wasn't. The media convicted him. Everybody said. So you can see why we have to be careful about sort of getting in a hurry and skipping the trial phase. But also imagine if Richard Jewell had been a black man in the South in 1920, what might have happened to him. This is why we have due process, to make sure that bias and systemic discrimination and perversion of justice don't occur. But in the Sixth Amendment, it also says that you have a right to a trial by jury to be a speedy trial. There was a young black kid from the Bronx, 16 years old, who was accused of a crime, Philippe Browder. Put on Rikers Island for 3 years without a trial. Put in solitary confinement, still never convicted of anything. He tried to commit suicide. You've seen TV, you know what can happen to you in prison. It could be a horrible thing. But to be in prison and never have been convicted of something, the person that accused him of the crime changed their story multiple times. Then it turns out was in the country illegally, fled back to Mexico, and then finally they said, I guess we have to drop the charges. Well, yeah, they pat him on the back and see ya. 3 years in prison. But when you see some of the anger in our country, there are people who are angry, they feel like they're being mistreated. Think about if you'd been Philippe Browder, or his mom, or his neighbors, or his friends. You can see why they think the man's not treating them fairly. Government's not treating them fairly. We know the danger of big government. But you know what? If we would also take that empathy to some of the least among us who know and suspect big government of not being fair to them also, we know it from a business point of view. They know it from a point of view of poverty. There's a big message here that brings a big crowd together. And I'm absolutely convinced if we become the party that cares about the Sixth Amendment as much as we care about the Second Amendment, we'll dominate. We'll be the dominant party in this country. We'll win again like we've never won. I want to be part of that, and I hope you do too. Thank you very much.
All right, now if you purchased a book from Barnes & Noble here, the senator's going to be sitting at the table ready to sign your book. So if you would, just go ahead and form a line.
They have the ones they
If you're a reporter, let the folks get their books signed first.
Are you going to grab the table in there?